Friends, I want you to picture something with me. It's the year 155 AD. You're in a massive stone amphitheater in the Roman city of Smyrna. The air is thick with the roar of a restless crowd. And in the very center of it all stands an 86-year-old man named Polycarp. He was a beloved pastor, a man who had personally learned from the Apostle John himself. The Roman governor looks at this old man and offers him an easy way out. Just say a few words, curse the name of Christ, give a little nod to the emperor, and you can go home. There's a pause. The whole stadium seems to hold its breath. Then, Polycarp speaks with a clear, steady voice, words that would echo for eternity. For 86 years I have been his servant, and he has never done me wrong. How can I blaspheme my king who saved me? What gives a man that kind of courage? And why was the most powerful empire on earth so threatened by one old man's faith that they felt they had to kill him in the most brutal way imaginable? This isn't just a 2,000-year-old history lesson. This story speaks directly to us, right here, right now. Because while we may not face a literal fire, we all face pressures to compromise, to stay quiet, and to bend our faith to fit the shape of the world around us. Polycarp's story forces us to ask, what is the core of our faith? And what are we willing to stand for when the heat is on?
A collision of worlds.
It's easy to think the Romans persecuted Christians just because they were intolerant bullies. But the real issue was much deeper. It was a head-on collision between two completely different ways of seeing the world. The nasty rumors they spread about Christians, awful things like cannibalism, were just smokescreens. The real conflict was about one thing. The Christians claimed that Jesus is the only way. The Romans just couldn't wrap their heads around it. First, think about it from the Roman side. Their whole religious system was like a giant open-door potluck. As the empire grew, they just added more gods to the collection. Their main goal was to keep all the gods happy. They called it the Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods. It was like a spiritual insurance policy for the empire. So their offer to the Christians was, from their perspective, totally reasonable. Hey, you can keep your Jesus. We've got plenty of room. Just add our gods to your list. Bow down to the emperor too, just to keep the peace. But the Christians said no. They insisted that Jesus wasn't just another god to add to the shelf. He was the one and only king. To the Romans, this wasn't just religious stubbornness. It was treason. It was like the Christians were intentionally trying to rock the boat and sink the entire ship of state. That's why they called them atheists. Not because they didn't believe in a god, but because they refused to honor all the other gods that kept the system running. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? Our world today preaches a very similar gospel. It's the gospel of pluralism and relativism. You have your truth, I have my truth. All paths lead to the same mountain. Our culture demands tolerance for everything except the one thing it can't tolerate: the claim of absolute truth. The world asks us, why does it have to be only Jesus? It gets angry at the very idea of sin. In a culture of you do you and live your truth, the biblical message that we are all accountable to God's unchanging standard feels judgmental and oppressive. Just like the Romans couldn't stomach Christian exclusivity, our modern world can't stomach its claims to absolute truth. But here's the most painful part. This way of thinking hasn't just stayed out there in the world. It has crept into the church. More and more we see Christians who have become so accustomed to the world's live and let live philosophy that they've become embarrassed by the bold claims of the gospel. They're tempted to water it down, to sand off the rough edges, to make it more palatable so it doesn't offend anyone. Polycarp could walk into that fire because he knew the value of what he had in Jesus. He knew that the grace that saved him was worth more than his comfort, his reputation, and even his life. If we lose sight of that value, then compromising with the world starts to look like the smart, sensible thing to do. We shrink our faith down from a world-changing public truth to a private, personal preference, like our favorite kind of coffee. The bottom line is that ancient Rome, the modern world, and sadly, parts of the church today all share one thing in common. They don't grasp the priceless, absolute value of the gospel. Polycarp and the first Christians did, and it changed how they lived and how they died.
The fire that wouldn't go out.
So how did this small, misunderstood group of believers manage to stand strong against the full force of the Roman Empire? Polycarp's final moments show us three core principles. Principle number 1, a clear and simple faith. Think about what Polycarp was dying for. It wasn't a political party. It wasn't a social agenda or a cultural tradition. His final stand was incredibly simple. My King who saved me. His faith was centered on a person, Jesus Christ, and the gratitude he had for his salvation. This is a powerful challenge for us. When we face criticism, we have to ask ourselves, what are we really defending? Are we defending Jesus, our King, or are we just defending our political tribe, our cultural comforts, or our traditions that we've wrapped in a Christian flag? The early church was persecuted for the sake of the gospel. How tragic is it that today the church is often criticized because it has become just another voice in the political shouting match? The early church was the victim of division and name-calling. Today, Christians are often the perpetrators, using our faith as a weapon to attack those on the other side of the aisle. The first Christians chose a third way. They didn't try to overthrow Rome with political power. Instead, they built a counterculture of love. They created a community so radically different, a community that served the poor, prayed for its enemies, and loved unconditionally, that it exposed the emptiness of the world's way of doing things. They showed the world what the kingdom of God looked like. That was their real power. Principle number 2, a life that matched the lips. Polycarp's final words had so much power because his 86 years of life backed them up. His confession wasn't just a statement, it was the conclusion to a long life of faithfulness. The same was true for the whole early church. Even though the Romans were baffled by their beliefs, they were also stunned by their lives. They saw people who prayed for those who hated them. They saw a community that took in the orphans, the widows, and the sick that Roman society had thrown away. Their integrity, their purity, and their sacrificial love for one another were revolutionary. Their unbelievable confession became believable because their inimitable lives proved it was real. Here's the hard truth for us. The church today isn't losing its influence because our sermons aren't loud enough or our buildings aren't big enough. We're losing influence when our lives don't look any different from the rest of the world. When our lives begin to demonstrate the life-changing power of the gospel, when we love our enemies, serve the forgotten, and forgive the unforgivable, then and only then will the world start to listen to our words again. Principle number 3, an unshakable hope. The records say that as the flames rose around him, Polycarp didn't scream. He prayed, thanking God for counting him worthy to share in this moment. What gives a person that kind of peace in the face of such horror? His eyes weren't on the flames in front of him, they were fixed on the crown of life that Jesus had promised him. He had an unshakable hope in the resurrection and the life to come, which made the temporary suffering of this world seem small in comparison. Maybe the reason we get so anxious about what the world thinks, so worried about losing our social standing or political influence, is that we've forgotten that this world is not our home. We've started to value the comforts of this life more than the promise of the next. The early church shows us that our real strength doesn't come from worldly power or approval. It comes from a confident hope in our coming King. When that hope is our anchor, we become free from the world's praise and its criticism.
Conclusion: the unquenchable flame, our mission today.
Let me leave you with this thought. The early church was persecuted because it was so radically different from the world. We need to ask if the church today is often criticized because it has become so disappointingly similar. The path to overcoming is the same now as it was then. It comes down to these three things: a simple and clear faith in Jesus Christ, a life that proves that faith is real, and an unshakable hope in the world to come. The fire that surrounded Polycarp didn't destroy his faith, it revealed it for all the world to see. And that is the same flame of faith, courage, and love that needs to be rekindled in each of our hearts today. Logos Global Academy currently streams in 11 languages and is expanding to over 20 languages to reach every corner of the globe. Please subscribe and become a member to empower this massive global mission. Thank you so much.